Richard Parker was startled. He attacked immediately. An epic battle began. Of interest to zoologists, I can report the following. A tiger will not at first attack a shark out of water with its jaws, but will rather strike at it with its forepaws. Richard Parker started clubbing the shark. I shuddered every blow. They were simply terrible. Just one Mako was not enjoying the treat was evident. Two could bumble. Paw into the mouth. The Mako closed its jaws. Immediately, Richard Parker reared onto his back legs. The shark was jerked up, but it wouldn't let go. Richard Parker fell back down, opened his mouth wide, and full out roared. I felt a blast of hot air against my body. The air visibly shook, like the heat coming off a road on a hot day. I can well imagine that somewhere far off, 150 miles away, a ship's watch looked startled and later reported the oddest thing. And trembled and turned liquid with fear and collapsed. The shark perceived only a dull vibration. Richard Parker turned and started clawing the shark's head, while his rear legs began tearing at its stomach and back. The shark held on to his paw, its only line of defense and attack, and thrashed its tail. Tiger and shark twisted and tumbled about. With great effort, I managed to gain enough control of my body to get onto the raft and release it. The lifeboat drifted away. I saw flashes of orange and deep blue, of fur and skin as the lifeboat rocked from side to side. Richard Parker's snarling was simply terrifying. At last, the boat stopped moving. After several minutes, Richard Parker sat up, licking his left paw. He spent much time on his forepaws. A shark's skin is covered with minute tubercles that make it as rough as sandpaper. He had no doubt cut himself while repeatedly raking the shark. His left paw was injured, but the damage did not seem permanent. No toes or claws were missing. As for the Mako, except for the tips of the tail and the mouth area, incongruously untouched, it was a half-eaten, butchered mess. Chunks of reddish-gray flesh and clumps of internal organs were strewn about. I managed to gaff some of the shark's remains, but to my disappointment, the vertebrae of sharks do not hold fluid. At least the flesh was, and the crunchy cartilage welcome respite from so much soft food. Subsequently, I went for smaller sharks, pups, really, myself. I found that stabbing them through the eyes with the knife was a faster, less. Chapter 80. Of all the Dorados, I remember one in particular, a special Dorado. It was early morning on a cloudy day, and we were in the midst of a storm of flying fish. Richard Parker was actively swatting at them. I was huddled behind a turtle shell, shielding myself from the Dorado hit the gunwale like a cannonball. Beneath the hail of flying fish and reached for the Dorado just ahead of a shark. Pulled it aboard. It was dead, or nearly there, and turning all kinds of colors. What a catch! What a catch! I thought excitedly. Thanks be to you, Jesus Matsia. The fish was fast weighed a good 40 pounds. It would feed a horde. Its eyes and spine would irrigate a desert. Alas, Richard Parker's great head had turned my way. I sensed it from the corner of my eyes. The flying fish were still coming, but he was no longer interested in them. It was the fish in my hands that was now the focus of his attention. He was 8 feet away. His mouth was half open, a fish wing dangling from it. His back became rounder. His rump wriggled. His tail twitched. It was clear. In a crouch, and he was making to attack me. It was too late to get away, too late even to blow my whistle. My time had come. Enough was enough. I had suffered so much. I was so hungry. There are only so many days you can go without eating. And so, in a moment of insanity brought on by hunger, wide-eyed, was not attacked at the face of a direct stare, but would wait until the deer or antelope or wild ox had turned his eyes. But you know that, and look like, are two very different things, and it's in this While you hold one line in the front of the base, another will come up to you. The Patriots battle at night was stabbed the north. They placed soldiers from the Russians on top of the top of the defense. Right. The Dorado into my hands and hurried away to the raft. Shortly thereafter, I delivered to the carpet a fair chunk. From that day onwards, I felt my master no longer impressed. No longer. Chapter 81. When I think back, a crude exploitation of Richard Parker's weak sea legs, not fully. There is another. I was the source of food and water. The water came from. And when we were hit by a school of flying fish, there too my role was not apparent. Thanks to Dutch reality, which was that when we looked beyond the funnel, we saw no river from which we could go. Chapter 82. I kept rainwater and the water I collected from the solar still in the locker, out of which those plastic bags would have been more precious than gold, sapphire, rubies, and diamonds. I worried extensively about them. My worry. To forestall such a tragedy, I wrapped them in blankets to keep them from rubbing over the lifeboat and moved them as little as possible to reduce wear and tear. But I fretted over the necks of the bags. Would the string not wear them thin? How would I seal the bags if their necks were torn? When the going was good, when the rain was torrential, when the bags had as much water as I thought they could take, I filled the bailing cups, the 2 plastic buckets, the 2 multi-purpose plastic containers, the 3 beakers, and the empty cans of water, which I now preciously kept. Next, I filled all the plastic vomit bags, sealing them by twisting them shut and making a knot. After that, if the rain was still coming down, I used myself as a container. I stuck on a occasion in the most constant source of anxiety and suffering throughout our journey. Of whatever he was immediately aware when I landed at Turkey, I think I set world records for sawing open the belly shells. It was not simply because of appalling hunger, it was also a plain rush. Sometimes I just didn't have the time to consider what was before me. It either went into my mouth. That instant, Richard Parker was on, stamping the ground, coughing impatient on the edge of his territory. It came as an unmistakable indication to me of how low I had sunk the day I noticed, with a pinching of the heart, that I ate like an animal. But this noisy, frantic, unchewing, wolfing down of mine was exactly the way Richard Parker ate. Chapter 83. The storm came on slowly one afternoon. The clouds looked as if they were stumbling along before the wind, frightened. The sea took its cue. It started rising and falling, and made my heart sink. What? I took in the solar stills and what I had seen now were mere hill of water. These swells were truly mountains. The valleys we found ourselves in were so deep they were gloomy. Their sides were so steep, the lifeboat started sliding down the very surface. The raft was getting exceptionally rough treatment, being pulled out of the water and dragged along, bouncing every which way. I deployed both sea anchors fully, at different lengths, so that they would not interfere with each other. Climbing the giant swells, the boat clung to the sea anchors like a mountain climber to a rope. We would rush up until we reached a snow-white crest in a burst of light and foam and a tipping forward of the lifeboat. The view would be clear for miles around, but the mountain would shift, and the ground beneath us would start sinking in a most stomach-sickening way. In no time, we would be sitting once again at the bottom of a dark alley, different from the last, but the same, with thousands of tons of water hovering above us, and with only our flimsy lightness to save us. The land would move once more, the sea anchor ropes would snap to tautness, and the roller coaster too well. Every swell at its crest wanted to take us for a tumble, but the anchors beyond the crest heaved mightily and pulled us through, but at the expense of pulling the front of the boat down. The result was an explosion of foam and spray at the bow. I was soaked through and through each time. Then a swell came up that was particularly intent on taking us along. This time, the bow vanished underwater. I was shocked and chilled and scared witless. I barely managed to hold on. The boat was swamped. I heard Richard Parker roar. I felt death was upon us. The only choice left to me was death by water or death by animal. I chose death by animal. While we sank down the back of the swell, I jumped onto the tarpaulin and unrolled it towards the stern, closing in Richard Parker. If he protested, I did not hear him. Faster than a sewing machine working a piece of cloth, I hooked down the tarpaulin on both sides of the boat. We were climbing again. The boat was lurching upwards steadily. It was hard to keep my balance. The lifeboat was now covered, and the tarpaulin battened down, except at my end. I squeezed in between the side bench and the tarpaulin and pulled the remaining tarpaulin over my head. I did not have much space. Between bench and gunwale there was 12 inches, and the side benches were only 1.5 feet wide. But I was not so foolhardy, even in the face of death, as to move onto the floor of the boat. There were 4 hooks left to catch. I slipped a hand through the opening and worked the rope. With each hook done, it was getting harder to get the next. I managed 2. 2 hooks left. The boat was rushing upwards in a smooth and unceasing motion. The incline was over 30 degrees. I could feel myself being pulled down towards the stern. Twisting my hand frantically, I succeeded in catching one more hook with the rope. It was the best I could do. This was not a job meant to be done from the inside of the lifeboat, but from the outside. I pulled hard on the rope, something made easier by the fact 45-degree incline. We must have been at a 60-degree incline when we reached the summit of the swell and broke through its crest onto the other side. The smallest portion of the swell's supply of water crashed down on us. I felt as if I were being pummeled by a great fist. The lifeboat abruptly tilted forward and everything was reversed. I was now at the lower end of the lifeboat, and the water that had swamped it, with a tiger soaking in it, came my way. I did not feel the tiger. I had no precise idea of where Richard Parker was. It was pitch black beneath the tarpaulin. But before we reached the next valley, I was half drowned. For the rest of that day and into the night, we went up and down, up and down, up and down, until terror became monotonous and was replaced by numbness and complete giving up. I held on to the tarpaulin rope with one hand and the edge of the bow bench with the other, while my body lay flat against the side bench. In this position, water pouring in, water pouring out, the tarpaulin beat me to a pulp. I was soaked and chilled, and I was bruised and cut by bones and turtle shells. The noise of the storm was constant, as was Richard Parker's snarling. Sometime during the night, my mind knew the storm was over.
And we can't get the hair back. Just like that. So I don't have to see it anymore.
I undid the tarpaulin and looked up at it. I noticed the loss of the raft at dawn. All that was left of it were 2 tied oars and the life jacket between them. They had the same effect on me as the last standing beam of a burnt-down house would have on a householder. I turned and scrutinized every quarter of the horizon.
What just happened there?
My little marine town had vanished. That the sea anchors, miraculously, were not lost, they continued to tug at the lifeboat faithfully, was a
I'm
consolation.
still in that fight? Wow.
The loss of the raft was perhaps not fatal to my body, but it felt fatal to my spirits. The boat was in a sorry state. The tarpaulin was torn in several places, some tears evidently the work of Richard Parker's claws. Much of our food was gone, either lost overboard or destroyed by the water that had come in. I was sore all over and had a bad cut on my thigh. The wound was swollen and white. I was nearly too afraid to check the contents of the locker. Thank God none of the water bags had split. The net and the solar stills, which I had not entirely deflated, had filled the empty space and prevented the bags from moving too much. I felt exhausted and depressed. I unhooked the tarpaulin at the stern. Richard Parker was so silent I wondered whether he had drowned. He hadn't. As I rolled back the tarpaulin to the middle bench and daylight came to him, he stirred and growled. He climbed out of the water and set himself on the stern bench. I took out needle and thread and went about mending the tears in the tarpaulin. Later, I tied one of the buckets to a rope and bailed the boat. Richard Parker watched me distractedly. He seemed to find nearly everything I did boring. The day was hot, and I proceeded slowly. One haul brought me something I had lost. I considered it. Cradled in the palm of my hand was all that remained between me and death, the last of the orange whistles. Chapter 84. I was on the tarpaulin, wrapped in a blanket, sleeping and dreaming and awakening and daydreaming and generally passing the time. There was a steady breeze. From time to time, spray was blown off the crest of a wave and wet the boat. Richard Parker had disappeared under the tarpaulin. He liked neither getting wet nor the ups and downs of the boat. But the sky was blue, the air was warm, and the sea was regular in its motion. I awoke because there was a blast. I opened my eyes and saw water in the sky. It crashed down on me. I looked up again. Cloudless blue sky. There was another blast, to my left, not as powerful as the first. Richard Parker growled fiercely. More water crashed against me. It had an unpleasant smell. I looked over the edge of the boat. The first thing I saw was a large black object floating in the water. It took me a few seconds to understand what it was. An arching wrinkle around its edge was my clue. It was an eye. It was a whale. Its eye, the size of my head, was looking directly at me. Richard Parker came up from beneath the tarpaulin. He hissed. I sensed, from a slight change in the glint of the whale's eye, that it was now looking at Richard Parker. It gazed for 30 seconds or so before gently sinking under. I worried that it might strike us with its tail, but it went straight down and vanished in the dark blue. Its tail was a huge, fading round bracket. I believe it was a whale looking for a mate. It must have decided that my size wouldn't do, and besides, I already seemed to have a mate. We saw a number of whales, but none so close up as that first one. I would be alerted to their presence by their spouting. They would emerge a short distance away, sometimes 3 or 4 of them, a short-lived archipelago of volcanic islands. These gentle behemoths always lifted my spirits. I was convinced that they understood my condition, that, at the sight of me, one of them exclaimed, "Oh, it's that castaway with the pussycat Bamfu was telling me about. Poor boy, hope he has enough plankton. I must tell Mumfu and Dumfu and Stimfu about him. I wonder if there isn't a ship around I could alert. His mother would be very happy to see him again. Goodbye, my boy. I'll try to help. My name's Pimfu." And so, through the grapevine, every whale of the Pacific knew of me, and I would have been saved long ago if Pimfu hadn't sought help from a Japanese ship whose dastardly crew harpooned her, the same fate as befell Lamfu at the hands of a Norwegian ship. The hunting of whales is a heinous crime. Dolphins were fairly regular visitors. One group stayed with us a whole day and night. They were very gay. Their plunging and turning and racing just beneath the hull seemed to have no purpose other than sporting fun. I tried to catch one, but none came close to the gaff, and even if one had, they were too fast and too big. I gave up and just watched them. I saw 6 birds in all. I took each one to be an angel announcing nearby land, but these were seafaring birds that could span the Pacific with hardly a flutter of the wings. I watched them with awe and envy and self-pity. Twice, I saw an albatross. Each flew by high in the air without taking any notice of us. I stared with my mouth open. They were something supernatural and incomprehensible. Another time, a short distance from the boat, 2 Wilson's petrels skimmed by, feet skipping on the water. They too took no notice of us and left me similarly amazed. We at last attracted the attention of a short-tailed shearwater. It circled above us, eventually dropping down. It kicked out its legs, turned its wings, and alighted in the water, floating as lightly as a cork. It eyed me with curiosity. I quickly baited a hook with a
Wait
flat
a
fish and threw the line its way. I put the weights on the line and had difficulty getting it close to the bird. On my third try, the bird paddled up to the sinking bait and plunged its head underwater to get at me. My heart pounded with excitement. I did not pull on the line for some seconds. When I did, the bird merely squawked and regurgitated what it had just felt in the air. Beatings of its wings, it was on its way. I had better luck with a masked booby. It appeared out of nowhere, glided towards us, wings spreading over, landed on the gunwale, and its round eyes took me in, expression puzzled and serious. It was a large bird with a pure snowy white body and wings that were jet black at their tip and rear edges. Its big, bulbous head had a very pointed orange-yellow beak, and the red eyes behind the black mask made it look like a thief who had had a very long night. Only the oversized brown webbed feet left something to be desired in their design. The bird was furious. It spent several minutes tweaking its feathers with its beak, its head backwards, one hand pushing up at the beak, the other holding the neck. There was much of a difference in taste. In its stomach, besides the morsel of dorado I had just given it, I found 3 small fish. After rinsing them of digestive juices, I ate them. I ate the bird's heart, liver, and lungs. The bird thundered far away. I thought it would stay at that, but a wind came up, throwing the rain this way and that. Right after, a white streaker came crashing down from the sky. I saw it was flat on the floor, visibly trembling. The effect on me was completely the opposite. It was to pull me out of my limited mortal ways and thrust me into a state of exalted wonder. Suddenly, the horse got much closer. Perhaps it was meant for us.
Where's the golf ball? Where'd the golf ball go?
Insubstantial yet overwhelmingly powerful. 10,000 birds and 20,000 drums could not have made as much noise. It appeared, the bolt vanished. The spray of hot water had not finished landing upon us, and already it was gone. The punished swell returned to black and rolled on indifferent. I was dazed, thunderstruck, nearly
Oh
in
my
the sense of the word,
God.
but not afraid. Praise be to Allah, Lord of all worlds, the compassionate, the merciful, ruler of judgment, I muttered. To Richard Parker, I shouted, "Stop your trembling! This is a miracle! This is an outbreak of divinity! This is... I could not find what it was, this thing so vast and fantastic. I was dead wide. The rain chilled me to the bone, but I was smiling. I remember that during my ordeal when I felt genuine happiness. At moments of wonder, it is easy to avoid small thinking, to entertain thoughts and the universe that capture both thunder and tinkle, thick and thin, the near and the far. Chapter 86. Richard Parker, a ship! I had the pleasure of shouting that once. I was overwhelmed with happiness. All hurt and frustration fell away, and I positively blazed with joy. We've made it! We're saved! Do you understand, Richard Parker? We're saved! I tried to control my excitement. What if the ship passed? Oh, I thank you, Lord Ganesha. Blessed be you in all your manifestations, Allah Brahman. It couldn't miss us. Can there be any happiness greater than salvation? It is no. I got to my feet. The first time in a long time I had made such an effort. Can you believe it, Richard Parker? People, food, a bed, life is ours once again. Oh, what bliss! The ship came closer still. It looked like an oil tanker. The shape of its bow was becoming distinct. Salvation wore a robe of black metal with white trim. And what if... I did not dare say words. But might there not be a chance that Father, Mother, and Ravi were still alive? The Simpson had a number of lifeboats. Perhaps they had reached Canada weeks ago and were anxiously waiting for news from me. Perhaps I was the only person from the wreck unaccounted for. My God! They're already in Winnipeg. Well, probably not. I suppose they would fill up with snow in winter. Pity. Please let the peace over the courtyard on a sunny day. I wonder what spices grow in Manitoba. The ship was very close. The crew better be stopping short or turning sharply soon. Yes, what spices? Oh my God. I realized with horror that the tanker was not simply coming our way. It was in fact bearing down on us. The bow was a vast wall of metal that was getting wider every second. A huge wave girdling it was advancing towards us relentlessly. Richard Parker felt like it was tiger-like, powerful, scary, and utterly suited to the situation.
Oh.
Richard Parker is going to run us over. What are we going to do? Quick, quick, up there! No! Must row! Or in orlop! There! Hum, hum! Richard Parker and the airboat stood up. The lifeboat slid off the bow and raced at less than 2 feet. The ship slid by for what seemed like a mile. A mile of high, flat, iron wall. A mile of passive fortification. A single sentinel languishing in hope. Fired off rifle. Instead of surging over the bulwarks and exploding in the captain's face, it ricocheted off the ship's side and went straight where it died with a hiss. I blew on my whistle with all my might. I shouted at the top of my lungs, all to no avail. Its engines rumbling loudly and its propellers chopping explosively underwater. The ship turned past us and left us bouncing and bobbing in its foggy wake. After so many natural sounds, these magical noises were strange and awesome and stunned me in silence. In less than 20 minutes, a ship of 300,000 tons became a speck on the horizon. When I turned away, Richard Parker still looking in its direction. After a few seconds, he turned away too, and my face was briefly met. My eyes expressed longing, hurt, anguish. Oh, on the outer limits of his business, he only saw the alpha here. This odd, unpredictable tiger had been very excited. He settled down to another nap. His sole comment on the event was a cranky meow. I love you. The words burst out pure and unfettered, infinite. The feeling flooded my chest. Truly, I do. I love you, Richard Parker. If I didn't have you now, I don't know what I would do. I don't think I would make it. No, I wouldn't. I would die of hopelessness. Don't give up, Richard Parker. Don't give up. I'll get you to land. I promise. I promise.
Don't give up, Richard Parker.
Chapter 87. One of my favorite methods of escape was what amounts to gentle asphyxiation. I used a piece of cloth that I cut from the remnants of a blanket. I called it my dream rag. I wet it with seawater so that it was soaked but not dripping. I lay comfortably on the top of it, and I placed the dream rag on my face, fitting it to my features. I would fall into a daze, not difficult for someone in such an advanced state of method to begin with. But the dream rag gave a special quality to my daze. It must have been the way it restricted my air intake. I was visited by the most extraordinary dreams, thoughts, sensations, remembrances. And time would be gobbled up. When a twitch or a gasp disturbed me and the rag fell away, I'd come to full
$5. Yeah, that's a bad idea.
One day, we came upon trash.
They only said don't play with scissors. Never said anything about knives.
Wine bottles, tatters of cloth, bits of rope, and, surrounding it all, some foam. We advanced into it. I looked to see if
Yeah, the speed can't handle it. Just like, whoa, where did I go? Oh, it's already back here. Didn't even see it move. You can't see me.
I reached out and grabbed the handle and the door open. A smell left out so pungent and disgusting that it seemed to color the air. And to my mouth, I looked.
Yes.
There were stains. dark juices, a quantity of completely rotten vegetables, milk so cold
Six
and infected,
sold, $30, zero work needed.
judging by its size, I think that it was a
Huh?
fully closed human cardboard. The smell had had the time to develop, to ferment, to grow bitter and angry. It assaulted my senses with pent-up rage that made my head reel, my stomach churn, and my legs wobble. Luckily, the sea quickly filled the horrid hole and the thing sank beneath the surface. The space left vacant by the departed refrigerator was filled by other trash. We left the trash behind. For a long time, when the wind came from that direction, I could still smell it. Even a message in the bottle. Japanese owned cargo ship, Simsum, flying Panamanian flag, sank July 2nd, 1977, in Pacific, 4 days out of Manila. Am in lifeboat, pipe attend my name. Have some food, some water, but Bengal tiger a serious problem. Please advise family in Winnipeg, Canada. Any help very much appreciated. Thank you. I corked the bottle and covered the cork with a piece of plastic. I tied the plastic to the neck of the bottle with nylon string, knotting it tightly. I launched the bottle into the water. Chapter 89. Everything suffered. Everything became sun-bleached and weather-beaten. The lifeboat, the raft until it the bags, the knives, the blankets, the net, all became worn, stretched, slack, cracked, dried, rotted, torn, discolored. What was orange became whitish orange. What was smooth became rough. What was rough became smooth. What was sharp became blunt. What was cold became tattered. Rubbing fish skins and turtle fat on things, as I did, greasing them a little, made no difference. The salt went on eating everything with its million hungry mouths. As for the sun, it roasted everything. It kept Richard Parker in partial subjugation. It picked skeletons clean and fired them to a gleaming white. It burned off my clothes. It would have burned off my skin, dark though it was, had I not protected it beneath blankets and propped up pillow shells. When the heat was unbearable, I took a bucket and poured seawater on myself. Sometimes the water was so warm it felt like snow. The sun also took care of all smells. I don't remember any smells, or only the smell of the spent hand flint shells. They smelled like human. Did I mention that? I don't even remember what Richard Parker smelled like. We perished away. It happened slowly so that I didn't notice it all the time. But I noticed it regularly. We were two emaciated mammals, parched and starving. Richard Parker's fur lost its luster, and some of it even fell away from his shoulders and haunches. He lost a lot of weight, became a skeleton in an oversized bag of faded fur. I too withered away, the moistness sucked out of me, my bones showing plainly through my thin flesh. I began to imitate Richard Parker in sleeping an incredible number of hours. It wasn't proper sleep, but a state of semi-consciousness in which daydreams and reality were nearly indistinguishable. I made much use of my dream rag. These are the last pages of my diary. Today, saw a shark bigger than any I've seen till now. A primeval monster 20 feet long, striped, a tiger shark, very dangerous, circled us. Feared it would attack. I've survived one tiger. Thought I would die at the hands of another. Did not attack. Floated away. Cloudy weather, but nothing. No rain. Only morning grayness. Dolphins. Tried to gaff one. Found I could not stand. R.P. weak and ill-tempered. Am so weak if he attacks, I won't be able to defend myself. Simply do not have me to blow whistle. Calm and burning hot day. Sun beating without mercy. Feel my brains are boiling inside my head. Feel horrid. Prostrate body and soul. Will die soon. RP breathing but not moving. Will die too. Will not kill. Salvation. An hour of heavy, delicious, beautiful rain. Filled mouth, filled bags and cans, filled body till it could not take another drop. Let myself be soaked to rinse off salt. Crawled over to see RP, not reacting. Body curled, tail flat, coat clumpy with wetness. Smaller when wet, bony. Touched him for first time ever. To see if dead. Not. Body still warm. Amazing to touch him. Even in this condition, firm, muscular, alive. Touched him, and fur shuddered as if I were a gnat. At length, head half in water stirred. Better to drink than to drown. Better sign still. Tail jumped. Threw piece of turtle meat in front of nose. Nothing. At last, half rose. To drink. Drank and drank. Ate. Did not rise fully. Spent a good hour licking himself all over. Slept. It's no use. Today, I die. I will die today. I die. This was my last entry. I went on from there, endured, but without noting it. Do you see these invisible spirals on the margins of the page? I thought I would run out of paper. It was the pens that ran out. Chapter 90. I said, Richard Parker, is something wrong? Have you gone blind? As I waved my hand in his face. For a day or two he had been rubbing his eyes and meowing disconsolately, but I thought nothing of it. Aches and pains were the only part of our diet that was abundant. I caught a dorado. We hadn't eaten anything in 3 days. A turtle had come up to the lifeboat the day before, but I had been too weak to pull it aboard. I cut the fish in 2 halves. Richard Parker was looking my way. I threw him his share. I expected him to catch it in his mouth smartly. After sniffing left and right, he found the fish and began eating it. We were slow eaters now. I peered into his eyes. They looked no different from any other day. Perhaps there was a little more discharge in the inner corners, but it was nothing dramatic, certainly not as dramatic as his overall appearance. The ordeal had reduced us to skin and bones. I realized that I had my answer in the very act of looking. I was staring into his eyes as if I were an eye doctor, while he was looking back vacantly. Only a blind wildcat.